Grant, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am good, sir. Welcome to our little Sheeks Freaks Mastermind Group here.
Cool.
Um,
That's good, man.
Thanks for joining us, taking time out of the end of your weekend. Uh, Remind me where you're at, Grant. Last time I talked to you, I think you had just moved.
Yeah, I'm in Ohio.
Okay, we got some fellow Ohioans. Is that how you say it? I don't know.
Yep.
Ohioans.
That
Uh,
I think that's it.
Um, we got two or three on the group here, on the call here. So this is kind of what we're going to do, Grant. We when we have a guest on, we generally let you start by kind of telling your story, which for you is an awesome one, um, and just kind of giving them some insight as to who you are, uh, how financial independence um, plays into your life, as well as real estate investing, and definitely, mention your awesome book and that experience. And then after that, we'll go into some Q&A. So I would say, we got you for about an hour. If your personal story, kind of telling everybody about yourself, if that lasts for, 15 minutes, give or take, that'd be perfect. Um, yeah. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds good. Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Here, I want to see if I can see. Is there like a way to see like a group? All right, cool. There's some people. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So yeah, I'm Grant Sabatier. I'm the author of Financial Freedom and the creator of Millennial Money. And my financial journey really starts at the age of 24, but I'm going to take you kind of all the way to back to the beginning, just kind of my origin story, which is my parents grew up in southern Indiana in a really tiny town with one stoplight and had very little money growing up. And decided when I was 6 months old to move to the suburbs of Washington, D.C., to kind of give me a different opportunity than they feel that they had. And so I'm an only child. They moved to DC. My mom was a secretary. My dad cleaned office buildings at night. They kind of started from the ground up, but they had moved to an area that was pretty affluent. And because they didn't have a lot of money, money was always something that stressed them out. It was always something that I remember them, fighting about it when I was young. I remember it always being talked about. It was something that was a huge stressor in our lives. And so growing up, I knew my parents were sacrificing a lot to give me an opportunity, but I worked hard. I ended up getting into a good college, went to college, studied philosophy, but graduated and really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And everyone around me was asking me, what's your purpose and what's your why and what do you want to be? And I actually think that's often one of the worst questions you can ask, someone who's 18 years old or 19 or 20, because you have no idea. And that put an incredible amount of pressure on me to just figure out what I wanted to do. And because I didn't know, I felt extremely lost. And so when you don't kind of know what you want to do, it's hard to find what you want to do. And so I ended up getting a number of different jobs out of college, never finding the right fit. The first job I got is, I don't know if you've ever, made a phone call and it says, this call will be recorded for quality assurance. I was actually the guy who was listening to those calls for American Airlines. And so 10 hours a day, I was listening to people complain because their flights were late or they wanted to get rebooked. And I mean, the job was just absolutely terrible. And I had to commute 2 hours each way. And it's funny because some people always joke and they said, there'd probably be no Grant Sabatier if he'd just gotten a job he liked when he graduated college. But I hated the job. I called my parents, I complained, and my dad just said, hey, welcome to the real world. And I was like, gosh, I can't imagine doing this, for the next 30, 40 years of my life. This is just absolutely terrible. And so quit that job, got another job, didn't like it, got a third job, got laid off, got a fourth job, got laid off. And then at the age of 24, I was completely broke and had to move back home with my parents. So I'm 24, my parents who'd made all these sacrifices for me. Here I was sleeping in the same bed that I slept in as a 7-year-old kid, and I was completely broke. I had $2.26 to my name. So what a way to feel confident about yourself and your life by having to go down and have dinner with your parents like you did when you were a kid. And so it was around this time I sent over 200 resumes out, still didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't get a single call back. But I started realizing for the first time that my parents, they'd gotten a little bit older, you know, and some of the dreams that they had talked about when I was growing up, they hadn't either accomplished them, or even more interesting to me was the fact they no longer had those dreams. So here I was, a 24-year-old kid, smack up against my parents who were getting older, and realizing that they'd spent their entire lives working for money, and a lot of the things they'd wanted to do, they haven't done. And some of the things that they had wanted to do, they actually no longer wanted to do. So I was like, gosh, you know, I don't want to work for the rest of my life and not be able to, you know, live the life that I want. And they took me to this barbecue in July 2010. It was like a July 4th barbecue. And I was like the adult kid there, and it was all these people in their, you know, 50s and 60s. And the only topic of conversation was retirement. They're like all excited. You know, we have 5 or 10 years till we get to retirement. And it was the most depressing thing that I'd ever heard in my entire life. I was like, this is absolutely terrible. Why are they so stressed about money? Why are my parents so stressed? Why am I stressed about money? What is money anyway? And I was a philosophy major, so I kind of put on that philosophy major hat, and I just wrote down all the things that I had been taught about money. And the first thing that I wrote down was that my dad used to always say, you know, time is money, or money is time. And I started thinking about this, and I was like, you know what? That's crap. That is the biggest myth of all, because you can always go out and make more money, but you can't get back your time. You know, you can always go out and side hustle or find a new job or try to make ends meet, but you're not going to get back this day. And so that's it. The fact that personal finance, a lot of the advice that we're given is built on this flawed premise, really piqued my interest. And I was like, okay, what else was I told? The second thing, you know, save 5% of your income. And so then I just did the simple math and realized if I saved 5% of my $42,000 salary that I had when I got laid off, I was never going to be able to retire. And of course, you get salary raises and your salary grows and you can change careers, but the math just didn't add up. It was too little money to be saving. And so then this piqued my interest more, and I just Googled best money books. And the first result that came up was a book called Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. And in that book, the book completely changed my life. I read it in August 2010. I encourage everyone to read it. It's the simple idea that whenever you're working, you're trading your life energy for money. And it's funny because Vicki Robin, the co-author, she's actually a really good friend of mine now, and she wrote the foreword to my book. And it's really funny because my takeaway was actually very different than what she intended. She wrote the book with Joe for artists to help people kind of escape the rat race and spend their time, you know, giving back in the world. I read the book and I was like, oh, if I'm going to trade my life energy for money, I need to figure out how to make as much money as quickly as possible. I'm going to like fast track this thing, and I'm going to try to reach financial independence as quickly as possible. So after that, I was fired up, but still didn't have a job. And so it was around this time that I was doing a simple Google search and saw a Google mobile ad. It was pretty early on after the iPhone had come out. And I saw this ad and I was like, oh, what's this? And so I Googled Google mobile ad and saw that jobs running Google campaigns were projected to grow 300% over the next decade, and that you could actually get certified by Google for free to run these Google campaigns. So I didn't have anything else to do. So taught myself how to run Google ad campaigns. I took the free certification exam for Google, completely overprepared, passed the exam, put it on my LinkedIn profile and on my resume, and literally didn't know what job I could apply to with the certification. But I found a digital marketing agency in Chicago, applied to the job, got the first job that I applied for, running Google ad campaigns for the Chicago Cubs, having no experience doing this at all. Got the job making $52,000, started saving 50% of my income immediately, got my own apartment, a $700 crappy apartment, got a $700 Nissan Maxima car, a crappy car, and then basically decided that I was going to spend all my time trying to make, save, and invest money. So I start the job, start learning all about digital marketing, and I was having lunch with one of the sales guys and learned that if a client didn't have a $100,000 budget, that our agency actually wouldn't take them. And so I told the sales guy, I said, hey, you know, if anyone calls and they're looking for help running their Google campaigns and they don't have the budget, pass them on to me. It's like, okay, I have to get CEO approval. The CEO is like, okay, that's, fine with me if you want to do this on the side. Fast forward to the end of that year, and I had made over $300,000. So $52,000 in my full-time job and almost $250,000 side hustling, running Google campaigns, building WordPress websites. And the entire time I'd invested 82% of that money. This is 2010, 2011. The market was growing. I was getting a great return. I was tracking my net worth, and I was really kind of off to the races. But I realized that most of the wealthiest people in the world, they didn't work for someone else, they worked for themselves. So I quit my full-time job, launched my own digital agency, launched a second digital agency, ended up having 32 employees, scaled that business. Fast forward 5 years, 3 months, and 6 days from the day that I left my parents' house, I had $1.25 million saved in liquid assets, and I'd reached financial independence a couple months after turning 30. So here I am, financially independent. I owned a piece of property, and then I bought a piece of rental property. I'll get into that in a second. But here I was, a millionaire, 30, no debt. I had a company with 32 employees, but I was still completely miserable. So it was incredible that I'd accomplished my goal, but here I'd realized that not only had I sacrificed the last 5 years, but I built a business and had employees who relied on me and clients who relied on me. And I had this American dream, but I already had enough money. I didn't want to do this. Working was a means to an end. The work was okay, but I didn't really love it. I was doing it to make money. And so I reached the point where I had to decide, how did I want to spend the rest of my life? And so this is 2015. I started millennialmoney.com, my website, started writing about personal finance. It's important to note that 2.5 years into this journey, I was doing it alone. I'd read Your Money or Your Life. I'd read Automatic Millionaire by David Bach, but it was in 2012, early 2013, when I first discovered that there were other people writing about this. So I connected with Brandon, mad scientist, and then I found Pete, Mr. Money Mustache. But it was really just a small handful of people writing about financial independence during this time. And it was kind of like, I felt like I was in this forest all alone. My friends all thought I was crazy. They were living paycheck to paycheck. And it was one of the things I realized, that the hardest thing about reaching financial independence, it wasn't the math, it wasn't even figuring out ways to make more money. It was actually choosing to live my life very differently than my parents and my friends, and even my girlfriend, who is now my wife. They made fun of my car, they made fun of my apartment. I remember driving my car, my mom was sitting in it, and she's just like, is this thing safe? I was driving her from O'Hare Airport down into Chicago. So that was really the hardest part about it for me. But I started Millennial Money. I started writing about personal finance, still had my business. I was blogging, in airports, on planes, when I had some extra time. And it was really in 2016, I started getting those first reader emails that were like, hey, I saved $3,000 this year. I've been reading you for a year. I love your perspective. I started a side hustle. One person reached out and they're like, you saved my marriage. And I still don't understand how I did that. But those emails, they filled me with a level of joy that was so far beyond anything that I had done in digital marketing. And I realized that, if I wanted to find my purpose in life, here it was. And it was kind of, I was 31 years old, and my purpose and my passion collided with me. That's when it really showed up, and I found what I loved doing. I no longer needed the money, and so I could make choices in my life. Sold my business to a business partner, got out, got a book deal with Penguin, started writing the book. And since that time, there have been over 35 million visitors to Millennial Money. The book is now in 17 languages all around the world. And I spend my time, doing what I love, which is teaching others how to live this different lifestyle and to make choices, because money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love. And since this time, of course, since 2010, now in the past decade, financial independence, the FIRE movement, has continued to grow, continued to expand. There's more people, all different backgrounds and locations, writing about this, thinking about this. And really, that's all I ever wanted, just people to realize that they don't have to accept the status quo, that you can retire early, that financial freedom is available to everyone as long as you think different and make different choices. And so there's a lot of stuff on the horizon. I just signed a television deal with Netflix. There's going to be a FIRE television show So a couple of us are making a TV show. It's super cool. It starts filming next month in Philadelphia. And this, it's going around the world, as you know. And yeah, I mean, that's my kind of story in a nutshell. Since that time, my investments have grown considerably to, now I have an 8-figure net worth. So my investments grew substantially. And I'm happy to answer questions about that, about real estate, about any sort of facet of that journey. One thing I have a hard time doing is anything in moderation. And so people often say, kind of look at me as this example of fast tracking financial independence. But actually in my book and in everything that I talk about, I say, hey, you got to live your own life. Don't live my life. In fact, if I was to do it again, I would have actually taken more time, slowed down, enjoyed my life a little bit more. I don't know why I was in such a rush, but hindsight's always 2020, and I can't complain too much about where I'm at today.
All right, Grant. Thank you for it's a great journey. It's fun to listen to the ups and the downs. I mean, those are some pretty significant downs, especially when you're 24 living at home. I had a period in my life in my actually early 30s where I did that for a couple months as well. But that just makes us who we are today, makes us stronger, and teaches us way more than if we never fail, we just don't learn anything. So I wanted to touch on 2 or 3 things you said, Grant, and then we'll transition to a Q&A. This is kind of a random question. When you went to college, when you graduated from college, did you have any student loan debt?
No. So I actually got an academic scholarship, which helped quite a bit, but I did have $22,000 credit card debt. So while it's not a student loan, I was definitely in debt, coming out of school.
Okay. And then this is a random selfish question. So you worked for the Chicago Cubs. I don't think we've talked about this. That's my team. I'm a diehard Cubs fan. Are you as well, or did you just happen to work with them?
No, so I worked for a digital agency and we had the Cubs contract. And I was I was on the merchandising side. So I was the guy, if you search for like Chicago Cubs memorabilia, I'd make sure that the Chicago Cubs were always first on Google and that they weren't getting undercut by, resellers basically, which, was a lot of fun. Got to go to quite a few games at Wrigley Field, which was a lot of fun. There's no better place in the summer than Wrigley Field. So yeah, I was certainly spoiled. It's funny because you kind of get into the working world and you get, I was actually pretty happy at that job, but realized that, I always kind of say that, ease and convenience are the enemy of financial freedom. Because like, if you get too comfortable in your life and it's just like, oh, I like that. I like going to the Cubs games, the free beer after work and those things, it's easy to get stuck. Employers try to keep you stuck. I mean, that's one of the things that they do. It's not in their best interest to help you get more freedom and more choices in your life.
All right. Thanks for that last comment. That is definitely true. Talk to us a little bit about real estate and how that has or hasn't been a part of your investments.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So hands down, I believe that real estate is the fastest path to financial independence. This is something that, I was turned on to about halfway through my journey. I realized, okay, I should buy, a property. I should stop renting. Once I had a ton of extra cash, that was when I started looking for a better property. My girlfriend also, who I wanted to get engaged to, I wanted to show that I had some upward momentum. Even though I was on the route to being a millionaire, I looked, 2 steps away from being homeless. So I decided to go house hunting with her, bought a really beautiful loft in downtown Chicago, got a great deal on it, bought it in the off season, bought it in December, and decided, okay, I want to start building a rental empire. And so my whole goal was actually, I wanted to buy the entire floor of my loft building and rent them out so I could actually pick my neighbors. So I ended up buying the unit next door to mine, and I had a tenant there who, at the end of the day, was a decent tenant. It was a cash flow positive property. I was making about $200 a month. But the problem that I ran into was, even just making $200 a month, it was too much of a headache for me, both from a tax perspective, both from a, hey, if I could build a website or build something online where I can make, $50,000 in a month versus getting, 4 or 5 cash flow properties that over time, certainly paying down the debt, they appreciate, I can build this big portfolio. I saw that as a potential pathway, but it actually seemed a little bit too slow for me. And the important thing is I bought this one rental property, but I knew that I didn't want to stay in Chicago long term. So I was always struggling with this idea of, do you buy rental properties in a market where you're not going to stay long term and where you're not going to live? Fast forward now to today, where I live in Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio is one of the best real estate markets to invest in the entire country. I just bought a property in December, and right now I'm actually looking for a 12 to 16 unit building because I have a lot of cash, and there's kind of an easy plug and play system here. I know a guy who's got the real estate attorney, he's got the landlord, he's got the broker, everything's kind of buttoned up. So I can just plug my money into this and just get the cash and either reinvest it, or what I personally am interested in is getting a property that's really just cash flow even. So I'm interested in the property appreciation more than I am in the cash flow, because right now I'm at a point in my life where I'm trying to keep my taxable income as low as possible. And so I don't want all these rental units throwing off cash that I'm getting taxed on. And so I'm happy to pay a little bit more for a building and have that appreciate in time. So I think that I can handle one 12 to 16 unit building, but I don't know. I've thought about this. I'm already worth 8 figures. I just turned 36 years old. I got more money than I'll ever need for the rest of my life already. My investments, naturally the market's done well, over the past 8 to 12 months. I think 2021, 2022 are going to be some of the best market numbers in history. So it's kind of like, how much do I even have to make my money grow? And is it ultimately worth the hassle? And so I'm using real estate really as a diversification play more than anything else.
All right, thanks for that. I'm going to guess there'll be some questions about real estate. So it's good that we touched on that. And I think I missed this, Grant, and I'll apologize. I should have told you a little bit about the group when we first started, and I'm not sure if I emailed that to you or not, but the group is, it's all young people from between 15 and about 20, 21 years old from across the country. Honestly, most of them I've connected with, or we connected on Bigger Pockets, but there are a few of them other places. And they're all super interested in real estate investing. I would say all of them are aspiring real estate investors. One of our members has bought his first property in the last month, and he's house hacking. So we have our first actual property owner, but the rest of them are not. They're on his heels for sure, and so that's their goal in the next couple. And I think they're all basically all headed towards a house hack to begin. It's such a great strategy. So that's kind of who they are. They're super motivated, and I want to go back to something you said. These young people listening to you right now are very, very motivated. I mean, first of all, they chose to, and they do this every week, to spend an hour and a half of their evening, first of all, listening to me talk at times, which is amazing, but they just get a lot from each other, and they're very motivated to succeed with real estate and investing and side hustles and frugality and all that, early financial independence stuff. So your journey, I think you were super motivated at one point, and you kind of mentioned it, where you went balls to the wall, pedal to the metal, and from dead broke to financially independent. That was really the primary focus, if not maybe the only focus. But now looking back, you kind of wish you would have done some things differently. Can you just kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, the fact that you all are so young thinking about this thing is the most important thing more than anything else. A lot of, the fact that you're intentionally thinking about going down this path is really the number one marker for success, because the most valuable asset that you do have is time. Whether it's the compounding of your investments when you start investing, the compounding of the appreciation of your properties, or even the compounding of any type of knowledge that you're learning in life. If I had known what, you all probably know at your age, it would have been dangerous. It's one of the great things about just time generally, is that younger and younger people are catching on to this. I get emails all the time from 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds. I got an email the other day from a 24-year-old, and he said, I just hit $1.25 million at 24. I wanted to let you know because I'm where you're at when you started. It's kind of just a funny, and of course I'm super excited. I want everyone to be, successful, but I am seeing people younger and younger reaching financial independence, which is awesome. I mean, you don't have to buy into the normal rat race, myth. A couple of things that I wish I would have done differently, or I actually wish I would have started investing in real estate earlier. So that is one of the top mistakes that I talk about in my book, because I wish I would have just right out the gate, when I had, a 5% down payment, put it down, paid the PMI, gotten invested in real estate. I wish I would have actually bought a property in an area of Chicago that wasn't as appreciated. And I was making this trade-off, because you always have to think about how are you also using money to make your life better. And your home, where you live, where you spend so much of your time, it actually has a huge impact on your quality of life. And so, the pendulum swings both ways. You don't want to go spend 40% of your paycheck on a home and be, house poor and living paycheck to paycheck. But I also don't recommend that, you live in a closet for 6 years just to save money. There is some fine balance. And, a lot of people will say this, spend money on those things that really make you happy and make your life better, and then just cut back on everything else. And your house is one of those things now where, for example, where I live in Columbus, Ohio, I literally just bought the second most expensive property in my neighborhood ever, in the history of my neighborhood. And when I went in to buy the property, my real estate agent, she's like, you're overpaying. What are you going to do? I just have to let you know this isn't a great deal. But the thing is, money is all relative. Me to go in and pay $100,000 above ask, all cash, getting into the market for the perfect property for me that I know is going to appreciate over time, it's all relative. And that actually gave me a competitive advantage. While on the flip side, I really wish that I would have invested in a property in Chicago that was in an up and coming area. There are some places, if I had invested in the West Loop instead of where I invested, or Logan Square, or Humboldt Park or Bucktown, and just held that property for the past 10 years, it would have more than doubled in value. So I made some of those decisions and those trade-offs because I wanted a nicer place. But I never actually did the house hack. One of the things that I did do is sublet arbitrage a couple of times, which is actually illegal in Chicago. And so I don't recommend that you do it. But what I would do is, in Hyde Park, where I lived at the University of Chicago, I would actually rent out sublets from international students who would go away for the summer. And then students who came in for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, I would rent those short-term rentals. And so I never actually owned or was the primary leaseholder on any of those properties. But I got down that rabbit hole just for some quick cash, but I don't recommend certainly that you do that. And it was pre-Airbnb, and so I didn't have that opportunity. I actually am a little concerned about Airbnb generally, and one of the things I think it's important to note, I know a lot of people who got burned during the pandemic with their Airbnb rental portfolios because they bought all these properties to Airbnb, and 5 or 6 properties, and then got hit with the pandemic. I also think that Airbnb's business model long-term is actually going to be unsustainable. And here's why I mean that. Even though, I like their brand right now, the fact is they charge way too high of a fee for what they provide. And so you're already starting to see a number of new startups coming in with lower fees and putting more of the money back in the hands of the property owner. So I think you're going to see Airbnb really struggle over the next 10 years. And you're also going to see more and more regulations for short-term rentals and properties across the United States, especially in metropolitan areas. I just rented a place in Palm Springs in California where they have Coachella. I was just out in California for 2 months enjoying the sunshine. We're in a beautiful Airbnb, but there are so many restrictions in Palm Springs with the noise, and you actually can't even play music outside. And as a rental property owner, if you have 3 tenants who don't obey that law and a noise complaint gets called on them, you actually lose your ability to rent your property now in Palm Springs. So there's just some, I think more and more legislation, more and more risk in building an Airbnb portfolio. So that's one of the things I'd want to note in real estate. And as I'm thinking now about real estate, one of the things I actually focus on is buying really unique properties. This is one of those areas that, I love the, historic home. I love the nice touches. I love the things that ultimately will set apart a home. I don't know if I'm going to live in this home I just bought forever, but one of the reasons I also bought it is because it's so unique in the neighborhood. I actually see price appreciation at the higher tiers of the market growing faster over the long term. The unfortunate downside of the wealth disparity in this country is that the wealthy are actually going to end up paying more and more for properties and be willing to pay more. So I think that price appreciation will actually increase, at a higher rate for higher end properties in a number of cities. And then, really the last mistake that I made was just choosing money above all else. And so, I lost a number of friends, during that period when I was pursuing financial independence, just because if you were my friend and you didn't want to side hustle on the weekend or make money, or you weren't thinking about making money, then I really probably wasn't going to hang out with you. And so, I didn't go to as many concerts as I wanted to. I wasn't the guy like having a beer with his friends, after work on a Thursday. I was either working or sleeping. And so that was one of the things, the pendulum kind of swings both ways. And especially when you're just starting out in your career and you're making money and it's growing and you realize that you have the capacity to make money, burnout is so real because you get out there and you just see all these other ways to make money. And this is the thing a lot of people don't realize is that, money making really is a habit. It's something that the more time that you spend thinking about it and doing it, the easier it actually becomes. And that was one of those things that I didn't expect. And so when you start seeing money making opportunities everywhere, it's very easy to kind of just chase the money. But at the end of the day, if you're not, I would say chill as hard as you hustle, just because, if you're not resting, I wish I would have rested more. I wish I would have gone out with my friends on the weekends. I wish, I can't get back, my late 20s. So realize right now that, if you're 16 years old to 21 years old, in a lot of ways, that's the best time of your life. I'm not saying that life doesn't get a lot better. Your 20s, you're on the grind, you're on the hustle, you're often stressed about money and whether you're doing the right thing with your life. When you get into your 30s, you kind of figure out what you like in life and it's easier to say no. So there are great things, as you get older. But, when you're 16 to 21, like you have so much time to recover from mistakes. And so the worst thing that you can do is not take enough risks. I would say, life is like investing. It's important to take calculated risks. And so take those risks now because you have so much more time to recover. People in the financial independence movement, just like myself, we tend to get obsessed and wedded to our spreadsheets and our numbers. And then we often become, captive to those. And so that's one of the important things too. I can't tell you how many emails I get from people stressed out and they can't sleep because their savings rate's only 50%. I literally get those emails. Like, I'm only saving 50% of my income. What do I do with my life? It always has me do a double take. But, so it's important just to have that perspective and have that context and try to rope a couple of your friends in with you too. It was pretty lonely when I was going down this path, and having a few friends, who are into what you're doing, buying real estate, maybe even buying a property with one of your friends, distributing some of the risk, especially if you have someone who has complementary skill sets with you. Maybe you're not great at numbers, but you're great at finding a good, a unique property. bring a friend in. That's, at the end of the day, probably going to make the journey, a lot more fun. And then, yeah, I think it's all like anything in life, it's all trade-offs. And so whenever you're spending your time, hunting properties and hunting deals, and, you're not spending that time, doing something else. And so, while I think real estate is the fastest path to financial independence, I'm not going to say it's the easiest. And I'm not going to say it's the easiest just because it does have that mental load associated with it. It does have, what I mean by mental load is even when you have everything buttoned up, you're still worried about, is this tenant doing this thing in the property? Is this happening? Do I have to think about, is that roof going to collapse? And, that does weigh on people. And the last thing I'll say, just because I think it's very important. On my book tour 2 years ago, I went to a Bigger Pockets meetup in Omaha, Nebraska. I was just coming through, Mindy and Carl, Mindy from Bigger Pockets. She's just like, hey, come over to this meetup. And I met all these pretty young, successful real estate investors in Omaha. And there's this one kid who's 26. And I could just tell immediately the dude was stressed out. I mean, just like super stressed, just looked kind of worried. I said, hey man, what's up? I can tell you're stressed out. And he's like, no, I'm not stressed, man. I'm good. And I said, okay, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And he says, I'm 26. I have over 200 doors. He owns over 200 properties. He's 26 years old, but the dude can't sleep at night because he's so stressed. He's making all this money, but he's so stressed about his units. And the one question that he couldn't answer when I asked him, I said, so, what's the plan, man? How much is enough? Like, how much is enough? Like, how many doors is going to be enough? And I often see in real estate, once you get going and you get the model and you're doing the house hack, and then you're buying 2 properties a year, and then you find that other deal, and then you invest in that multi-unit building, and then you want to sell that building and flip to a bigger building, and it just keeps on going. When at the end of the day, if you're making enough cash to cover the expenses, of your life, and you're already financially independent, no matter how much money you're saving. And then when you're past that point, it's kind of like, what's the point? And then this is when you get to the question, you'll get there one day, you'll all get there, where you got more than enough money than you'll ever need. And other people who have more than enough money than they'll ever need, but they're still doing the same thing that they're doing. And you say, hey, why are you still doing this? And they say, it's all I've ever known. I love it. I just love it. And the only reason they say that is because they actually haven't taken the time in their life to figure out the other things that they love. And once again, ease and convenience are the enemy of financial freedom, because it's so much easier to keep doing what you've always been doing than it is to just say, hey, I did what I wanted to do. I made that money. Even though I could keep doing this and make $100 million, I want to try something new. I'm going to sell off my properties. I'm going to put, this real estate business on the shelf, and I'm going to go do something else. So naturally, as humans, we fear uncertainty and not knowing. But I tend to believe, at least in my own life, it's that uncertainty and that not knowing, that risk taking, that actually leads to, living a richer life and having a lot more fun and meeting, cooler people. It's not that hard to get rich. You guys will all be rich, without a doubt. By the time you're 30, 35, without a doubt. Just the fact that you're on this call. The big thing is preparing yourselves for what comes after that, because that's where the real work comes in, because then you can actually do whatever you want with your time, and really expand your life. So we don't have to go down too far down that rabbit hole, but it's something I obviously think a lot about.
Great. I agree with a lot of the things you said or that you touched on, Grant. I agree that everybody on this call is going to be a millionaire before they even know it, because they are just doing a lot of things right. 2, I agree with what you said about once you know how to make money, it just gets easier and easier. And I think about so many people I've met or listened to on podcasts say that if they lost everything today, the knowledge, the experience, and the confidence they have, they would get back there really quickly. And a lot of people did indeed do exactly that in 2008, 2009. And then the last thing you said, I also agree with you on the mentality of, I think so many people that are go-getters and they do real estate and they start investing, they'd have a really hard time pulling that lever back when they do get to a point where they are good. And it's not a right or wrong decision unless you really don't stop and take a big picture view of your life and say, is this where I wanted to be? And am I now there? What is really going to make me happy going forward? And that, I love Bigger Pockets, but the one complaint I guess I have about their podcast is they tend to interview guests who are 200, 400,000 units and are just growing and growing and growing. I wish they would interview more of the people. Well, kind of like, not that I want them to interview me, but like my wife and I have 15 units. We're done. We're going to pay them off and we're going to be good. And that's all we need. We don't want another 5 or another 100 because it is work. It's passive, but it's still some work. But like Brandon Turner is a great example. He's not slowing down and he absolutely could, but that's just what I think he just really enjoys it. At least I hope he does. Seems like he's having fun. So you mentioned some other things, Grant, that I think that I kind of have questions on, but I think the members will be probably hitting on most of those. So what we like to do, we got, about 20 minutes left. Turn it over to Q&A, which the way we normally do this is if you can turn your chat on so you can see your chat. They've already started to put some questions in there. Some of them you've answered, actually. So if you see one that you've answered, you can skip it. But just kind of read a question and then answer it as best as you can and then go to the next one. Again, if you get to one you've already touched on, then you don't have to say it again. I'm trying to see where the top is here.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're ready, go for it.
Cool. Jabbar asks, hey, Grant, since you probably have come across many people who have achieved FI relatively quickly, what would you say is the fastest way or vessel to achieve at least $1 million net worth? Also, could you explain why? Yeah, so I mentioned this a little bit. While I do think that real estate is the fastest path, simply because, your net worth can be calculated, it doesn't have to be your liquid assets. It's the value of the properties that you own or your assets minus your liabilities. And so, if you buy, 4 or 5 properties that have appreciated in value to $1 million, or say $2 million, but you own $1 million in debt on them, you would be a millionaire. But personally, I would never want to owe $1 million even on a portfolio of properties, because that would just stress me out. I like to keep my debt as low as possible. So I think the fastest way is to own your own business. And I think that, there's a fair amount of information out there about this, but I do believe that, whenever you're, say, working, you're trading your own time for money. But when you have a company and you hire other people to work, you're actually brokering other people's time. And so there's a lot more scale to that. And so I'm so happy that during the pandemic, the data shows that more and more people are starting their own businesses, starting their own companies. And so I encourage you, no matter what you're doing, think about being an entrepreneur in some way. It doesn't have to be your full-time job, but even having a side hustle that you could scale. Or in my book, I have a very detailed chapter on how to pick a side hustle and grow it and scale it, and the trade-offs and why you need to think about side hustling different. Being an entrepreneur, without a doubt, is, I think, the most fun and the most scalable way to become financially independent. And then you can actually build what I call a lifestyle business, which you get to the point where you're already financially independent, but you still have a business, and you can actually just adapt that business, to your life, or you could sell that business. So really encourage you to think about being an owner and launching a business if you can. How did your stock portfolio look when you got started, and how did you change it over time? So this is an important thing to note. From a stock investing perspective, about 70% of my money is in a total stock market index fund, VTSAX, which you've probably heard about, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, which is just a very diversified, there's over 2,000 US stocks in that in that fund, very low expense ratio, very efficient, invest most of your money in the entire market. With that being said, I started buying individual stocks in 2010 and then really beefed that up in 2011. I got in shortly after Facebook's IPO. I bought quite a bit of Amazon stock. A lot of people in the financial independence movement aren't too keen on buying individual stocks, but I actually like them because it makes investing a little more fun. It can give you more upside. I've actually beaten the market 9 out of the last 10 years. I'm not going to say I beat it by crazy amounts, but if there's a company that you've analyzed and they have a moat and they've got a great business, I knew that Amazon was going to keep growing, that they were going to keep dominating. If you find companies like that you've actually studied and you want to buy them, I encourage you to do so. So now I'm at a point where I have about 20 individual stocks, but about 70% of my net worth is just in a total stock market index fund. I actually was a pretty early investor in cryptocurrencies, which I don't recommend. I've sold most of my Bitcoin over time and actually had a fair amount of it stolen at one point, which we won't get into. But over time, I really haven't changed much. I still have most of my money in the total index because, but one of the things that's important to note, I've never actually invested in bonds. And so a lot of the advice out there is invest your age in bonds. But when you're young, like you are, when you have a lot of time for your portfolio to recover, I recommend 100% in stocks, not including real estate, of course, and just continuing to, invest early, often, and as much as you can. And that early, often, and as much as you can is a very important piece. So the money that I started investing in 2010 has at least tripled or quadrupled since that time. So, you all have probably read that, $1 invested at the age of 20 is worth 3 to 4 times more than $1 invested at the age of 30 because you accelerate the rate of compounding. And I actually found, if you read my book, get the paperback version, in the appendix, I have the entire analysis of this, but I actually figured out that I needed less money to retire at the age of 35 than I would retiring at the age of 60. And so if you can get the rate of acceleration of compounding going fast enough, you actually need less money because you have so much more time for that money to grow and compound, even when you're living off of it. So that's one of the things very few people talk about, that if you get enough money, you can save $1 million, $2 million by the time you're 30, then you can, they call it coast-fi now, I think, where it's just like you have enough saved already that you could live off it forever and decide if you want to keep working. And so the more money that you can accumulate earlier, the faster that you can reach that point. Joe asked, did you ever house hack? How do you plan on growing your wealth further with real estate? So yeah, I mentioned that I didn't house hack, and I'm looking for a 12 to 16 unit building strictly for diversification into real estate. I have no interest in becoming a real estate mogul. Sanibel asked, how many properties do you own now? And are you planning to purchase any more? So I currently only own one property, but we'll hopefully have an apartment building soon. In Columbus, there's also some decent single family home deals that I've looked at, but haven't decided to purchase any. This is an important thing too, because I think, at my standpoint with my net worth, I'd have to own a fair amount of property for it to move the needle. And I don't know if that risk reward hassle is worth it. When you can have your money in stocks and, invested in other type of digital properties that are growing, that's something, even though real estate's going fast, if I had 50 properties and needed to sell a few, that would still take some time. That would still cost some money. Whereas today with my investments, I can just sell the stock, and have that, money in my bank in 3 or 4 days, as opposed to it not being as liquid if it's just in real estate. How'd you raise capital or put the initial money to fund your real estate deals? I actually don't recommend raising capital for anything that you do in your life. I think a lot of, especially entrepreneurs, they start a startup, they go out and they try to get investors. whenever you take someone else's money, they're always going to be looking over your shoulder, ensuring that they get that money back. And it actually often will cloud your decisions. And so in all three of the companies that I've launched, I've never taken on additional money ever. I actually recommend entrepreneurs don't take additional money, to bootstrap as long as they can. Same thing's true in real estate, with the exception of course, getting a mortgage on your first house hack. But private financing, not a fan of. You just taking other people's money, always creates restrictions, limitations, and at least for me, likely more stress. Benjamin asked, what percentage of your investing portfolio is in the market? What's your strategy? So I'd say about 90% of my net worth is invested in the market, as I said, in the total stock market index fund and a handful of individual stocks. And then I have about 10% of my money in alternative assets. So a little bit in cryptocurrency, very small amount. I actually been buying sports cards for the past couple of years. That's one of the things that's just a lot of fun. I have a little bit of art, some of these alternative asset classes that are more like hobbies and a lot of fun, but they do have, some upside potential long term. If you could restart your Carson asked if you could restart your FI journey at 24, what would you do differently? As I mentioned, I would have bought a property earlier. I would have house hacked right out of the gate. That would have been a no-brainer, but I didn't know about that at the age of 24. So that's something that I definitely would have done differently. What else would I have done? One of the things I think it's important to note, and this isn't really kind of this question, but it's very important to make sure that, when you're in high school, when you go into college, if you decide to go to college at all, to develop a monetizable skill set. And so you want to find a good way to make money that you enjoy, that gives you the ability to save for your money to grow. And what I mean by this is when you're thinking about your career, a lot of times people advise you, what do you want to do for the next 20, 30 years? I think that's unrealistic, because honestly, the jobs that will exist in 20 or 30 years don't exist right now. Of course, there'll still be doctors and lawyers, but a lot of the jobs won't exist. And so it's really important to find a job where you can make a good amount of money, hopefully quite a bit of money over the next 10 years, just so you have more potential to save. And this is an important thing to note. I talk a lot about this in my book, like how to optimize your 9-to-5 job. I encourage you to read that chapter, because it's very important to remember that your full-time job is the opportunity where you have the opportunity to save and make the most money when you're first starting out. So I encourage you, when you get that full-time job, try to save 30 to 50% of your income immediately, and make sure that you're taking advantage of all the benefits. A lot of people don't go to the human resources department and take advantage of all the amazing benefits. So use that. I call it, use your full-time job as a launch pad, but you want to have an in-demand skill set. I think, digital marketing is, what I got into, obviously, that was just somewhat in its infancy, but I knew that I could, it was in demand. And so I was always going to be able to find a job, and that I, could make money. If you were 18 years old, how would you craft your life when it comes to financial independence, real estate and other investments, or relationship or time management? If I was 18 years old, I honestly would have spent, I kind of wasted my college years. I had a good time. I read a lot of books, but, I wasn't an entrepreneur. I wasn't interested in real estate. I didn't know anything about financial independence. So those college years, actually 18 to 22, whether you decide to go to college or not, you have a lot of free time, even when you're in college. So using that time to start a company or build a new skill set, or, at the end of the day, a lot of colleges aren't that great at helping you get jobs. And so starting early to figure out what you want to do, not forever, I talked about that, but just something you want to try, and try to get an internship, try to, just do something on your own. Use that time between 18 and 24 to build skills. And I would say that skills are future currency, because those skills that you build are going to help you. Everyone should know how to build a WordPress website. Everyone should know how to run a Facebook ad campaign. Everyone should know how to use, Adobe Photoshop or InDesign. Everyone should know basic HTML and ideally Java. Everyone should read a book about, copywriting. There's some of these core things that even if you don't get into any of those fields, having those skill sets are going to set you up for success. I often like to say that the people that have the best chance are the ones that develop complementary skill sets. It's the people who don't just focus exclusively on one thing, and that's why learning HTML and Java is a no-brainer. You can do it for free on your own time, just watching YouTube videos. That's a no-brainer. The more of those skill sets you have, the more opportunities you're going to have over the long term. So build skills between 18 and 25. As a young person, how important do you think it is to diversify amongst other asset classes? I don't think it's very important at all. I think, invest in stocks and real estate. I wouldn't even consider bonds if you're a young person. Stocks and real estate, that's it. Two most dependable, best track records, best blueprint. Focus on those two things and spend the rest of your time building skills. What did you do self-development wise to build the self-belief in yourself to get where you are today? Yeah, the mindset piece is really kind of hard. It's easier to take risks in life when you have nothing to lose, which when you're 24 living with your parents and you're broke, you got nothing to lose. And so that's kind of where my mindset came from, honestly, was just being broke and ashamed and feeling like I let my parents down. The same thing can be said, when you're 16 years old or 18 years old or 22, you don't have much to lose. And so starting that company, I actually started two companies that completely failed before I had my first successful one. And so just try things, just go out, try things. The worst thing that you can do is just nothing. I have so many people that, they're like, oh, I had the idea for Uber 2 years before, Uber came out. And it's like, okay, whatever, like an idea is just an idea. Actually go out and try something, start something, even if you're going to fail, because that mindset, every time that you kind of fail, you're learning something. You're just acquiring new knowledge. And without a doubt, the most important sort of individual attribute you can have, which you probably all have, to be successful is just curiosity. A lot of people do the bare minimum in life. And that's one of the things that I'm just going to tell you now, in 10 years, you're gonna remember this conversation, and you're gonna be chatting with one of your coworkers, and you're gonna realize that they're just doing as little as possible in life, and then they're complaining about where they're at in life. Most people do as little as possible, and the status quo is really your enemy. Not hard to get a decent job and make decent money and get trapped. I can tell you that right now. Most people, that's the path they choose, and then they complain about it for 40 years. A little bit harder to, even when you're comfortable, say, hey, I could be doing more here. What returns are you getting from art or some of your other alternative investments? I don't know if any of you invest in sports cards, but it's just been absolutely ridiculous over the past 2 years. So I've gotten some amazing returns on my sports card investments. Not so much art. I've bought art that I like and that I enjoy, and I haven't even tried to sell any of it. All right, cool. It's 8:30. I have a little extra time, but I want to check in now. I've turned off the Zoom. Where's the Zoom?
Let's, I think we got looks like 3 more questions. So let's just do those, Grant, if you can, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good. I'll get back to chat. Oh, yeah. Cool. I have a company I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to sell a product through an e-commerce store, but it's hard to scale. Facebook ads not giving a good ROI. How would you recommend I generate more sales and grow my business? That is a very specific question, Jaden. Yeah, one of the things about Facebook ads is that they're a lot more expensive than they were. And it's definitely harder to get a high ROI. Depending upon the product that you're selling, consider looking into native ads, Outbrain and Taboola. Those are the ads you see on the bottom of news websites. Just look into native advertising. That's where the ad, you actually buy the ad and it goes underneath a piece of content and kind of blends in with the content. Native ads is one of those areas that's a lot more cost effective, less targeting options than Facebook ads, but certainly one that you should consider. Look for Reddit ads, Quora ads, Pinterest ads. Those are all ad spaces that are a lot cheaper than Facebook and Google. And on Facebook, I only recommend that you manage your campaigns based on return on ad spend. So just come up with whatever margin you're trying to make on your product and then have the system automate. A lot of times Facebook ads, a lot of people, when you say not giving you a good ROI, you just haven't tested long enough. It takes, enough, like $3,000 to $5,000 and a good 2 to 3 months to test ads. So the ad algorithm actually knows what you're trying to do. So a lot of people just either they don't spend enough money out the gate on Facebook ads or they haven't run them long enough. So that's just a tip there. Tip for starting and writing a blog, how to write consistently and be motivated to update your blog for years. Number one, write about something you actually care about, because when no one's reading your blog at first, the only thing keeping you going is your own curiosity and interest. It's kind of like being a boxer or something. Like the first year of writing a blog, you're just learning how to punch and lifting weights and doing the reps. Over time, the more you write, the better writer you become. And the better writer you become, the easier it is to communicate your ideas. And the easier it is to communicate your ideas, the easier it is to connect with people. And it's important to note whenever you're writing a blog or a book or obviously creating YouTube videos, anything, what you're actually doing is not creating content, you're actually trying to form a connection with people. And so behind the words is an actual person. And so the more relatable you are, the more of your own story that you share, the more vulnerable you are, often the more successful you're going to be. But the only way to write consistently is to write about a topic that you love. I would have been writing about personal finance even if I never had any readers, just because I loved it so much. I was so interested in it. And it really was, my passion. The important thing to note too is, over a number of years of blogging, motivation only takes you so far. And so it's also okay to take breaks sometimes. Oftentimes, you won't hear this. It's like publish every Tuesday for 10 years. But, if you get burnt out, tell your audience, hey, I'm gonna take a break. I'm a little burnt out and just take a break. And so one way to get away with that is, focus on building your email list and just hit up your email list. Those are going to be the people that love reading what you write, and say, hey, I need a break. I'm going to take a month off, stay on the list. I'll see you soon. What other topics should I cover? And then finally, Leo, could you talk on accountability and how important it is to achieve this financial plus life success? Yeah, this is a really great question, Leo. And I'll end on this. I think it's really important. We've talked a lot about the money, talked a little bit about real estate, obviously about financial independence. It's important to define success for yourself. And for some people, that's an amount of money. For some people, it's a certain lifestyle. For some people, it's being able to take care of their parents when they get older, some blend of all of those things. But it's important to figure out what kind of life you want to live, not the life that your parents want you to live, or your friends are living, or someone you met lives, or that I live. The better you know yourself, the easier all of this stuff becomes, because it makes the trade-offs easier to make. You know what's going to make you happy. You've taken some risks to figure out things that you love, and defining success for yourself is extremely important. And what I mean by that is just, who you are today. And this is one of the biggest things about personal finance is there's kind of this, apply for everyone's system, but who you are today at 18 years old is going to be very different than who you're going to be at 25 and 30, without a doubt. And so you can't even begin to imagine what your life's going to look like when you're that age. So the important thing is just plan out over the next couple of years and refine as you go. And that's the thing, is the better you know yourself, the easier it is to make decisions about when you want to stay up late, side hustling, or when you want to buy a new property, or, honestly, maybe you realize all this is about real estate. Maybe after your first house hack, you realize you don't want to be in real estate, but maybe you'll feel bad about that because you spent all this time reading about it and learning about it. Learning to trust your feelings and your intuition beyond just your mind. You're obviously all smart people. You're thinking about this, you're rational. Your feelings and your intuition are actually extremely powerful. And so if there's something that you're doing when it comes to money that you don't like, you should listen to yourself and dig a little bit deeper and figure out why. Because maybe you don't like real estate. Maybe you don't like having a business. Maybe you don't like saving 80% of your income. And that's all cool, because you are you, and you're different than everyone else. And so the better you know yourself, I often found that once I started, instead of asking myself did this make me happy, or did I enjoy this, I just asked myself, did it make me feel alive? And so that like in my life, living a fulfilled life is feeling alive. That doesn't mean I'm going to be happy all the time. It doesn't mean everything's going to go my way, but I want to feel like I'm living my best life and making the most of my life and feeling completely alive. And so that's been my anchor over the last 5 years. And it makes it so easy to make trade-offs and make decisions, because it's really, really, really important. At some point in your life, you're going to have to go from saying yes to no. And I find that the most successful people in life are often the best ones at saying no, because the world will always try to take your time, and it will always try to take your money. And so if you can learn how to say no based on knowing kind of who you are, life becomes a lot easier, because far too many people spend all their day in meetings at a job that they hate, and they just never actually say no. So I know that's a lot kind of in that question, but the fact that you're asking it, at such a young age, just, trust your gut. This blueprint is already there. Read my book, read Set for Life by Scott Trench, Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez, Quit Like a Millionaire by, Bryce and Christy, Early Retirement Extreme by Jacob, Automatic Millionaire by David Bach, I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, and and then get the blueprint, and then use it to live an awesome life.
All right, Grant, that was awesome stuff. We appreciate you being here. I forgot to mention, we had Cody Berman on as a guest about a month ago, and he talked a little bit about his road trip with you when you were doing your book tour. I didn't realize he was on that tour with you, but he said he had a blast hanging out with you, traveling the country, and talking FI with people all over. So great to have you on, Grant. Definitely appreciate you giving your time to these young people, helping them out. Just loads and loads and loads of good advice and insights from someone who's done it. And so I know they took a lot away from this. We appreciate you, Grant. We'll let you, log out and get back to your life and having fun. And I'll be in touch, but thanks again. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
If you like this video and want to see more like it, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You should also go check out our website and Instagram, which are both linked below this video. Thanks again for watching. Now go and get your freak on.